Hour, I have Dr. Bridge Bombi. Dr. Bombi is the leading cardiologist in town. Dr. Bombi's been with us on this show for about a year. I'm so honored and privileged to have him here as he tackles some of these medical issues that a lot of us, quite frankly, really aren't equipped to deal with, and he has a knack for breaking them all down and to explain them in ways we can understand, particularly with this coronavirus. There is a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of fear. We've come an awfully long way in the last 9-10 months. We're on the cusp of something really important. We're waiting on the FDA to give a final approval for the Pfizer vaccine. That approval's given. We've heard that we could, Kern County could have as many as 6,000 of the initial vials for inoculations to start maybe as early as next week. And yet still, survey after survey shows that 40% of Americans are reluctant to take this. Either they don't believe in vaccines, they believe it's been rushed, they don't believe, they worry about any possible side effects. That's why we have people like Dr. Bombi in. We're lucky that Dr. Bombi is accompanied today by a friend of his. That would be Dr. Norman Lepore. Let me tell you something about Dr. Lepore. He's a fellow at the American College of Cardiologists. He works out of Cedars, Beverly Hills. He served on the board of directors of the American College of Cardiology and is past president of the ACC's California chapter. He remains active in lobbying for patients and health care in D.C. and Sacramento. And as Dr. Bombi says, he's well known as a triple threat through his accomplishments as a clinician, a educator, and a clinical research scientist. Dr. Bombi, welcome. Dr. Lepore, welcome to the show. Glad to have both of you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Dr. Bombi, let's start with you, if we could, sir. We're on the cusp of something really important happening here, yet there still remains a lot of anxiety. We read it in our own newspaper today about the number of ICU beds is at a critical stage here. Under open beds is under 2%. Could you take a minute and kind of step back and give us the historical perspective of where we started and where we are now?
First of all, Richard, I'd like to welcome my good friend, Dr. Lepore, and happy Hanukkah, Norm. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Doc.
Lepore,
thank you.
Dr. Lepore is a fountain of knowledge, and I look forward to his words of wisdom. The history of COVID starting, I think the date keeps moving backwards. We thought it originally invaded the U.S. in the late January, but looks like it might have been a month or 6 weeks earlier, December or so. And we did, Richard, you remember, we did good by blocking the traffic from China January 28th and eventually extending that traffic, the air traffic to Europe. So we were able to contain the dissemination of the virus early on, but we had 3 weeks of head start, which we could have used more effectively as far as the PPE and other things were concerned. So what we gained in delaying the virus to come in, we lost in not putting those 3 weeks to good use. And we discussed early on that in the first round, we were blindsided. We didn't know much about the virus. There was a lot of fear of the contagion. There was dread associated with it. And we were underprepared in terms of PPE. We were underprepared in terms of our toolbox for taking care of the patients. So we learned a lot. And then we discussed that once understanding the behavior of the virus, we know its striking range. We could work with the virus if and when the vaccinations are there to salvage us out of this chaos. But then we didn't learn. We had a peak in March, April, another one in June, July, August, and we are amidst the mother of all peaks right now. We are doing 200,000 plus infections a day. There are 3,000 plus people dying a day. and we have really maxed out the hospital capacity in terms of ICUs. So we, through our lackadaisical behavior, through our defiance, have pretty much recreated the circumstances where we were overwhelmed, first without not knowing the nature of the virus, now not respecting the virus. So it's a full circle. As Shakespeare said, the wheel has come full circle, and we haven't learned anything yet. It's a good thing that the vaccine is on the horizon, and hopefully the vaccination of the high-risk people and the healthcare and others will start early next week. But our behavior is still going to be the main determinant in immediate outcomes in the next 2, 3, 4 months.
That's so true. Thank you, Doctor. That's Dr. Bridge Bomby. Dr. Lepore, let's turn to you first. Welcome, sir, to this radio program. I know you're a busy guy, and I so deeply appreciate you coming on to share your expertise for us, Dr. Lepore. Dr. Lepore, you just heard Dr. Bomby talking about the great. There is a sense in this community of not so much a rejection or denial of the virus, but more so a denial of or a refusal to conform to protocol, so to speak. Dr. Bomby called it defiance and not respecting the virus. I'm curious from your perspective in LA County and down where you work, are you seeing a similar reluctance among people to, number one, accept the severity of it, and number two, you see it up here, a lot of people who say they're just not going to get inoculated?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me on the program, and I'm honored to be associated with Dr. Bomby, who's an incredible resource for Bakersfield and the surrounding areas. Let me preface my remarks by saying, America, where is your common sense and your compassion? America, where has it gone?
Thank you, sir.
This issue has been so politicized, in terms of the way one approaches the problem, one's behavior. It depends if you're on the right or it's on the left. COVID-19 doesn't really care whether you're on the right or on the left. But these measures that we've been talking about for months, they don't eliminate the chance of spreading the virus, but they reduce the chance of spreading the virus. Wearing a mask, washing your hands frequently, avoiding close contact, particularly indoors. These do mitigate or reduce risk. Common sense. Why do we, when we do our surgeries, when we do our procedures, when Dr. Bomby is working his art in patients' hearts, why does he wear a mask? Okay, he wears a mask because he doesn't want to spread germs. This is not something that's imagination. It's not something that we're trying to take away, one's civil rights, because it's important that we not only protect ourselves and that we stop being so self-centered, but we care, we have compassion for those around us, for our neighbors, for our friends, for our coworkers, for strangers we may come across in the supermarket or in line at the pharmacy. It's incredibly important. And I think just to get to specifically to your question about LA County, I think until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, this COVID-19 threat was really abstract. It wasn't something that really people perceived as something that they would have to deal with. And now, if you think about it, how many stories have you now heard about family members? It could be cousins, it could be siblings, it could be parents or friends or coworkers. Now we're inundated with stories of people closer to us than ever before. So COVID-19 has now really broken through the gate and is encroaching on our family and our friends and our social circle. And the problem with this disease is, yes, you can get away with feeling like you get a bad flu and then you get on your way, but it's more like playing Russian roulette. You don't know if you're going to be the one who's going to end up being admitted to the hospital. You don't know if you're going to be the one in the who's so sick that you're in an ICU, that you're going to have to be put on a breathing tube where you can't talk and you're basically sedated into an almost comatose state, or die. And you can't predict it. So one should not presume that they are going to be able to avoid these long-term effects. I have, Dr. Bombi and I both have young patients who have complications. They're in their 30s and 40s. They'll have clots to their lungs, or they'll have clots forming in their arteries of the heart, or they'll be developing cognitive dysfunction, meaning they basically are dumb. You know, you have very smart people who can't even think straight anymore, or they develop weakening of the heart. Yes, all these are potential what they call long haulers. These are complications that we're now seeing more and more as more and more people are being afflicted with COVID-19.
God, the long haulers, yeah, that's all I need. I got enough problems. I'm going to grow dumb as well. Do you have, I mean, up here, in addition to that kind of resistance, you have people who say, I'm just not going to take it. I don't, I mean, I've never lived in a community where there's so many people who claim that they just don't take vaccines. My question for you, Dr. Lepore, and then I'll get to you, Dr. Bombi, is at what point is there a number where we need to get? Is there a percentage of Americans that we need to get vaccinated where the herd immunity or whatever, it kicks in? I mean, if 40% of Americans don't take it, what happens?
Well, Dr. Bombi actually has written on this particular subject, so I'm going to let him really give the more authoritative answer. Let me just say that what's going on right now with COVID-19 is a huge forest fire, okay? And Bakersfield area has experienced. It's a huge forest fire of disease right now. And unless we can get 70, 80, 90% of the folks either immunized or those who have been exposed and are now immune, the embers of COVID-19 will percolate throughout the country. And that means we'll never get rid of it. It'll be something which will be there where we may get some points of exacerbations, but there will always be embers of COVID-19 unless we can really eradicate it by virtue of effective and safe vaccines or treatments for people, early treatments for people who may not be able to get a vaccine. It sounds like the United States government under-ordered vaccine.
Yeah.
And we may not be able to immunize those who want it until towards the end of next year. But Dr. Bombi is really more the expert on this herd immunity concept.
Okay, Dr. Bombi, what about that? What happens if half or 40 or 50% of Americans just don't take the vaccine?
So first of all, Dr. Lepore, thank you very much for that eloquent sermon. And I do want all the listeners to please pay heed. Let's not self-destruct. As I keep saying, Richard, which team are you on? Team virus or Team America? Second thing, on the coattails of what Dr. Lepore said about partial solutions, you have to understand there isn't a silver bullet. So partial solutions include hygiene, they include masks, they include separations and social distancing as the vaccine comes and helps us out. So it's a false dichotomy to assume that a partial solution, if it's not a complete solution, is a totally useless tool. There is a cognitive psychologist, his name is James T. Reason, who wrote about this concept called Swiss cheese model, which I'll elaborate later because we are running short on time. But coming to the immunity, the herd immunity is best accomplished through the vaccination because the fallout, the dangerous consequences are much less as compared to the regular infection. So the good thing about the vaccines developed by Moderna and Pfizer is the efficacy rate is 95%. So higher the efficacy rate, lower the number of people who need to be vaccinated. So if you have a 95% efficacious vaccine, even if 60% of the people volunteer to have the vaccine, that should create enough for herd immunity.
Interesting.
Part of the herd immunity has already been built with about 10 or 15% of the U.S. population infected by the virus itself. So given the superiority of the vaccines that have been developed by these two manufacturers, I feel comfortable that 60%, 70% combined immunity in the community will be sufficient to overcome the threat of COVID. But to the point Dr. Lepore makes, the durability of the immunity is another dimension on its own, and only time will tell how durable it is. And a lot of people suspect that this will become a part of the flu vaccine's annual ritual, that you get the vaccine. On the vaccine front, a couple things happened today. There is a virus, the vaccine that was being developed by GlaxoSmithKline in conjunction with Sanofi, that got a big hiccup because the dosage was miscalculated based on a reagent that was faulty from a laboratory. So the whole research fell apart. So they could restart the trial in February, and the earliest that vaccine becomes available will be at the end of the next year. So that puts strain on the scalability of existing technologies. So that's a big setback for us and the humanity as a whole. The vaccine has been delayed. The second thing that happened on the vaccine front is that AstraZeneca is joining forces with Sputnik from Russia, and they're using one of their adenoviruses in conjunction with theirs to have a 1-2 shot. So they're trying to fortify the two technologies into one to make a better vaccine. So that what it does is it pushes the timeline further. Even though we are elated to have Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, it just puts a strain on the scalability and the availability, even in this country, because about 100 million dosages were, U.S. put in about 100 million dosages worth of money in Sanofi and GlaxoSmithKline combo. So there's a good news, bad news day today.
Oh, man, that's crazy. Dr. Lepore, I don't want to run out of time. I want to ask you this. Do you get a lot of up here you hear people talking about the side effects? And Dr. Bombi has told us that this is not a case where side effects, that most of the side effects are going to show up in the first couple months. This is not something that 5 years later. What do you tell your friends who say, well, I'm worried about the side effects with the new vaccine?
So that's a great question, and I'll tell you, patients will ask me about side effects really for anything that I prescribe. And I think what we have to realize is there's nothing in life without a side effect, whether it's driving your car, going to a restaurant, taking an airplane. Everything has side effects, but what you have to weigh the side effects is against the benefit. And of course, we know that this virus is a potential killer, certainly even more likely to cause a level of short, medium, or even long-term disability. So when you add the benefit and you weigh it against the risk, I would have to say that based on the current state of knowledge, the benefit far outweighs the risk, and therefore I would recommend it. If I can just digress for 1 second, I think Dr. Bombi's analogy of Team Virus versus Team America is spot on. This is like a football game. When you watch a football game, what happens? You can see on the team people of different races, people of different backgrounds, people of different religions. And you know something? They're all pulling on the same side to win. And I think to what Dr. Bombi has said, we have to really think like this. Do you really want to be on Team Virus, or do you want to be on Team America? And I think that this is basically the essence of what we're trying to do. Let's not pull apart. Let's pull together and do the common sense things. Let's make sure that when we have access, if we're at risk, that we get immunized as soon as possible. So, I'm rooting for Team America.
I'm with you there, Dr. Lepore. We're out of time, guys. That's Dr. Norman Lepore from Cedars, Beverly Hills, a guest on this program and a dear friend of Dr. Bridge Bomby of Centric Health. Dr. Bomby, thank you as always every Saturday. Dr. Lepore, thank you, sir. It was an honor to have you here.
Honored to be here. Thank you, Dr. Bomby.
Thank you, Norman.
Okay.